Earnings from Honeywell and GE show the diverging fortunes of America's great conglomerates. Now, they dominated the Dow Industrials in the 1970s. For sure they did. Their products were everywhere. You're talking about everything from turbines, appliances, fighter jets, and thermostats. The Honeywell round was so iconic. Yes, this little number is actually in the Smithsonian. I've hacked a few of these in hotels in my day. We bought this one this morning at Home Depot. Yes, it still exists. Now, we're going to use it to take the temperature of America's famous industrial brands. Now, first up, Honeywell. Business is heating up. From the 1950s to the 1980s, Honeywell moved into computers, heating systems, and aerospace. More recently, tax cuts, increased military spending, and those rising oil prices have all helped the company's finances. Next up, though, we have GE. Very, very cold out there. The empire that once included everything from TV stations to jet engines has absolutely crumbled. It's now trying to offload money-losing businesses and pay down those massive pension obligations. Next up, the big blue machine, IBM, back to warm. Now, the company that revolutionized computers sold most of its hardware business in 2004. Like Microsoft, its focus on cloud-based services has, in fact, paid off. But who can forget this? I can't. Finally, Sears. Yes, it's frostbite for Sears. The empire once included credit cards, internet services, appliances, and of course, the great retail brand. Most of that is gone now. Sears has even gotten rid of so many of its stores. Here to tell us why some have succeeded where others have failed, Jim Corridor is the Director of Industrials Equity Research at CFRA. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, think about that. GE, it meant at one time so much to so many people, a shell of its former self. And yet, in the same breath, we're talking about even companies like Microsoft, that some is still the definition of a conglomerate, but is doing very well. What is the difference here? Is there a lesson to be learned?
Sure. I mean, there's two reasons to become a conglomerate. One is to acquire complementary businesses that make sense and give you some kind of synergies of cost or R&D or purchasing of some kind. The other is to provide diversification so that if one sector is doing well, the other sector is not doing as well. GE has chosen to do both strategies, and neither has really worked out for it. It levered up its balance sheet. It decided to enter the consumer finance business. It became a systemically important financial institution for a while, and all of that led to increased risk for the company, a highly leveraged balance sheet, and they've spent years trying to offload a lot of those assets, and it's still an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process, and Jim, what is the moral of the story there? You know, at one time, bigger was better, and the diversification that you're talking about helped insulate companies. But now it seems as if companies just are not seeming to be able to focus on any one revenue stream or on any one profit generator. But there seems to be no one rule there.
Well, that's why it's really important to make sure that the businesses you own make some kind of sense, whether it's either from a standpoint of shared R&D, shared sales forces, or provide some kind of major diversification that if one sector is doing poorly, like the oil and gas business is for GE, that some other sector, like healthcare and aviation, is doing better. The problem that GE had is that it grew too much, grew too fast, and it doubled down on its strategy to invest in industrials, oil and gas, and power at exactly the wrong time.
But what about Honeywell? Why does it seem to have dodged a lot of these similar problems?
Well, Honeywell never had a huge consumer finance business, so they never had the huge balance sheet issues that GE did. They're also not as exposed to oil and gas. They're not in the power business. The fields that they are in, which is related to aerospace and defense, which is related to the home, residential and non-residential construction, those are all areas that are doing relatively well right now. So they are seeing the positive side of diversification without any of the negatives right now.
The issue here, though, also seems to be in the kinds of businesses we're talking about. We were talking about the 60s, 70s, the 80s, and GE, even Honeywell in those years. Now, if you look at Microsoft, IBM, and even Amazon, has it been a choice? They have not adapted to the market fundamentals the way they should have. They've been dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, when you acquire a business, that's not the end of the story. You have to continue to maintain that business. You have to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world and make sure that that business remains systemically important to your business. And GE has dropped the ball on a number of that, and that's part of the reason for their downfall.